What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Parker, it's here. It's OU Texas week, and man, I don't think anybody really cares. Come on, it's OU's 1-2. Texas should be 1-2. What a turd of a game this is. But Parker, I'm here to tell you, man, I don't know how many of these you've covered. This is my 16th in a row, I think. It is the best rivalry game in all of college football. That is me talking, not Lincoln Riley. And you know what? We have seen some classics in the worst of years. Who remembers 1996? OU was 0-4. Texas was 3-2. John Blake gets his first win, 30-27. It was the first overtime game in the history for both schools, man. Whether these teams are elite or, the opposite of elite, whatever that is. This game is amazing. It's going to be amazing, Parker, on Saturday. You and I are both going to be there at the Cotton Bowl for this one.
That is true, John. And the biggest thing that I'm going to be excited to see is how different the atmosphere is inside the Cotton Bowl, because is OU Texas going to be OU Texas without 90,000 screaming fans, one half in burnt orange, one half in crimson and cream? I mean, we're still getting a football game between OU and Texas, but that aspect of the environment is just so crucial to the entire experience of the rivalry, which, as you mentioned, John, I don't know that I would agree that it's the best in college football. I'm obviously a little biased in that capacity. I will say I think Caroline would fight you on that, an Alabama native, being that she is. She would probably say it's the Iron Bowl between the Tide and the Auburn Tigers. But no, it doesn't get a whole lot better than OU Texas, and it's going to be different. No state fair, 23,000-ish fans. It's going to be a unique experience, but hey, that's what we're used to. It's a unique game every year between these two schools, and I'm excited to get there on Saturday and see how it plays out.
I vote OU Texas, 50-yard line, State Fair, Texas, all that good stuff. I'm John Hoover. I'm from Tulsa. I'm in Tulsa. That's Parker Thune. He's in Norman. He's from Omaha, he tells me. We'll see about that. I think he likes the Cornhuskers. Is that the vibe I'm getting from you on the rivalry there, Parker?
No, John. Nebraska doesn't have any rivals. I never cheered for the Huskers anyway. Also, their biggest rivalry was their rivalry with Oklahoma, which thankfully we're getting that renewed here in a couple of years. But for where they're at right now in the Big Ten, their biggest rival is Iowa. And I've been stumping for years to get that rivalry dubbed the Corn Bowl, but I don't know if they will ever adopt that recommendation.
Sponsored by Kellogg's Corn Flakes. Thanks for listening to the SI Sooners podcast, and thanks for watching the SI Sooners podcast on YouTube. Parker, man, as I said, it's OU Texas week, and we got Alex Grinch and a couple of linebackers on the old Zoom today, Wednesday afternoon. But here's how you know the state of this program right now. It was about 40 minutes on the Zoom. There weren't a whole ton of questions about the Longhorns. There were a few, but most of the questions to Grinch and to Sean White and Nick Bonito were about how to fix the defense. Do they do more tackling in practice? Do they take on mental exercises to help them tackle better and cover better? What went wrong in the fourth quarter against Iowa State and Kansas State? That's how you know. If they were 3-0 or if there was no COVID and they were 5-0, every question, I guarantee it, man, every question today would have been about Texas. Alex Grinch, how do you combat Sam Ehlinger, Keontae Ingram, Rashawn Johnson? Oh, my gosh, Brennan Eagles, the deep threat. Joshua Moore leads the team in receiving. Cade Brewer. What about Tom Herman? Oh, they got two new coordinators, Mike Yursich and Chris Ash. Oh, my gosh, Alex Grinch, how are you going to stop these mighty Texas Longhorns? But no, they're 1-2, and the questions for the OU defensive coordinator and his guys are simple. Do you think you can tackle anybody this weekend? Are you guys playing the wrong players? Do you need like a sports psychologist? Can I get you a pillow? Parker, we'll make our picks in just a minute, but how do you think Oklahoma rebounds from what Deshaun White called a crappy feeling this week against their greatest rival?
Well, Texas is going to be as difficult a team to rebound against as any, John, and that's not simply because this rivalry game is so huge. It's because Sam Ehlinger's a really tough player to tackle. And Oklahoma's found that out over the last 3 years. And what's OU's biggest weakness right now, arguably, at least on the defensive side? It's tackling. And look, here's the thing. OU struggles to defend dual-threat quarterbacks enough already. We saw that with Skylar Thompson back in week 2. But you get Sam Ehlinger rolling into the Cotton Bowl with this Texas offense that has weapons whom you named off. Oklahoma's going to have their work cut out for them. And they're not going to have any margin for error against a team like the Texas Longhorns. They're going to have to be meticulous about the fundamentals. And as I look at the way that they've played over the last couple of weeks, John, I think what I'm beginning to realize is what struck me is that they're playing too fast. There's too much speed D right now. They're flying all over the place, over pursuing, over correcting, and they're not letting the game come to them. They're not controlling the pace, which they're going to have to do in the Big 12 against these up-tempo offenses, not the least of which is Sam Ehlinger in Texas. And so my biggest concern, John, is first and foremost, can they tackle Sam Ehlinger? Because they've struggled with that enough over the last 3 years, and they weren't coming off back-to-back losses in any of their previous games against Texas. So how much does that affect their mentality? How much does that affect their willingness to get in the hole and challenge Ehlinger when he tucks it and runs? And hey, he can sling it a little bit too. Sam Ehlinger isn't the fullback that a lot of people seem to construe him as. Sam Ehlinger can wing it, and he's got some receivers. And so this Oklahoma defense is going to have to be attentive to the little things on Saturday if they're going to be able to contain Ehlinger in this Longhorn offense.
Yeah, Parker, do you think you listened to the Lincoln Riley press conference on Tuesday? You were on that Zoom call. Do you think Lincoln's coming around to kind of what we've been saying for most of the last about 12 months now? And that is the OU defense is paralyzed by the thought of takeaways and that they can't do anything else. Did you catch the phrasing and the terminology that he used when he answered that question? It was a question followed by a follow-up question about, are guys realistically able to perform basic functions when all they can think about is takeaways. He actually answered it, and he was actually honest about it, and it almost sounded like he threw Alex Grinch not under the bus, but kind of pushed him maybe a little bit in front of the bus. What'd you think about that?
Well, I'll use an analogy here, John. I was a longtime baseball player, played all the way through my first couple of years at college, and so here's what I can tell you. When I went up to the plate with the intention of swinging for the fences and trying to hit a home run, generally I didn't end up making contact. And you're seeing the same thing with the Sooners defense. You do lose that ability to perform those very basic functions, making contact with the baseball in the case of this analogy, but also being able to tackle and being able to secure easy interceptions in the Sooners case. When you're going for the home run on every swing, or every play, if you're the Sooner defense, stuff's going to get neglected, and you're going to lose the capacity to be able to perform the fundamental tasks of your assignment on a very basic level. And I think that's what we're witnessing. And it's interesting to me, John, because I think Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch, I think it's become very apparent the last couple weeks that they're not seeing eye to eye on these things. They're not. Yeah, and Riley came out in his press conference early last week and said, we need to be less results-oriented, as you'll recall. And meanwhile, Grinch is like, hey, this is a results business, and we're failing at it. And likewise, Lincoln Riley's saying, okay, I think there is some credence to the notion that playing for takeaways is hurting us rather than aiding us. And Alex Grinch seems pretty unwilling to come to that same conclusion. And he's making concessions here and there. But on the large scale, he's not backing down from his philosophy. And so it makes me wonder, John, at what point does Riley start to override Grinch, start to strong-arm him, and say, hey, you know what? We need to change things up a little bit because we're getting burned week in and week out, and this can't continue to happen.
I just have one question. Did they call you Parker Baseball, like my man Donnie Baseball?
No, they did not. That was a missed opportunity there.
They didn't?
Dang.
Okay, that's a missed opportunity, I got to say. Tell me you had hitting streaks like Ichiro. I bet you had hitting streaks like 50-game hitting streaks like Ichiro, right?
And when I was about 11 or 12, I got up to high school and it was a lot more hit or miss, but it is what it is.
There you go. Okay, so we know the stats, you guys. It's OU's lost 2 in a row for the first time since 99 in the regular season. Started 0-2 in Big 12 play for the first time since 98. Pre-Stoops, right? So now the Sooners, we know that they started 0-4 in 1996, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. But do you know the last time they actually started 1-3? In other words, if they were to lose on Saturday, they would be 1-3. The last time they had a 1-3 record was 1965. It was before I was born, and I'm old. They did it in 1964 too. Yeah, the same year the Beatles came to America. That was Gomer Jones's only 2 seasons. He got fired, of course. How long ago was this? He replaced Bud Wilkinson, Parker. I mean, OU is making the wrong kind of history this year if they lose this game. There is a lot of pressure on Oklahoma to win this game.
There is, and there's a lot more pressure on Oklahoma than there is on Texas, just because it seems like the expectations for Oklahoma coming into the year were that much higher than Texas, as they should be, because you look at the last decade, Oklahoma has been a lot more consistently successful than the Longhorns. And so, listen, the expectation was never that Texas was going to beat Oklahoma this year. It was vice versa. And now you come into this game, and it's as much of a toss-up as ever. And you have to think that, hey, maybe the Longhorns are even favored here. And I think they're definitely, and we'll get into this more, but I think they're definitely in a better position just being the more experienced team, John.
Yeah, Parker, OU was a 2-point favorite. I saw it today at Vegas Insider. It's been 2.5 all week long. And I want to talk about this some more in more detail in just a sec, but does that still make sense to you?
Oklahoma being favored? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. Does that still make sense to you?
No, it does. And I think the reason being is that Oklahoma, if you look at the top 22 guys on Oklahoma's roster, the guys that line up as the starters at each position, Oklahoma's a better football team than Texas in terms of talent. I don't know that they're better in any other capacity right now, but they're better in terms of talent. And so, yes, it makes sense to me. I wouldn't be surprised if by Saturday you had a push there. Maybe the Longhorns are even favored by a point and a half. But it doesn't surprise me at all. The margin's as close as it is right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Listen, now betonline.ag this week lists OU as the favorite, not just to win Saturday, but to win the Big 12 Conference. Still, OU, the Sooners, the team that came home from Ames 0-2 with its tail between its legs like a whipped dog. OU is plus 200, which means a $100 bet wins you $200. Oklahoma State is second, according to these odds, at plus 250. Texas is plus 325, Iowa State plus 350. TCU is way down at plus 900, and nobody else is better than 1,400 right now. So as it stands right now, the odds makers, who I got to admit always seem to know something the rest of us do not, they like Oklahoma to win the Big 12, still at 0-2. However unlikely it may seem right now, it's not like it's inconceivable, They just have to think about it, win the rest of their games, and hope Iowa State or Kansas State lose 2 or at least 3 games, 3 preferably, but 2 losses by either one of those guys, Cyclones or Wildcats, allows you to start coming up with ways to get into a 3-way tiebreaker. You'd have to win some crazy tiebreaker. It's happened before. It's happened to Oklahoma before a handful of times. So remember, all you got to do now is finish second to get to the title game. So that's basically where it starts. How in the world does Vegas still have OU as the Big 12 favorite? Have they literally not watched the Sooners play, or probably more likely they turned the games off in the third quarter? I don't know. That's actually the easy part of this. I think we've all come to realize with some certain, some degree of certainty, I guess, that the Big 12 ain't very good. Big 12 kind of stinks. Iowa State, yeah, sure. The same Iowa State team that lost to Louisiana. Kansas State, the same K-State team that lost to Arkansas State. I mean, Oklahoma State, sure, they're in the lead right now. They almost lost to Tulsa, which beat UCF, by the way. Texas, of course, yeah, sure, let's put them in there. They should have lost to Texas Tech, and they did lose to TCU, which lost to Iowa State. So here's the bottom line. Like Prince said, you might not know it now, but this Oklahoma team, they still have the most talent in the Big 12. Like Parker said in regards to Texas, I think they have the most depth in the Big 12. They probably second to Texas in what you'd say 4 or 5-star recruits, but probably will produce the most NFL guys. So why not Oklahoma? And the last 5 years we've been saying they've got the best coaches. This coaching staff, oh my gosh, Lincoln Riley. Now all of a sudden those coaches are idiots? Come on. I'm going to tell you something, Parker, and I know the fans don't want to hear this. Nobody likes excuses, and I've said it before. I hate excuses. Hate them. But the fact is, this OU team is 2 plays away from being 3-0. 2 plays away from being 3-0, and possibly, if that happens, ranked number 3 in the country. That's a fact. Just tackle Deuce Vaughn once, and tackle, Tariq Milton or Xavier Hutchinson or Breece Hall once. Pick a guy. Just tackle him once. Maybe make somebody on offense needs to make a play in the fourth quarter. Pick anybody in the fourth quarter to make a play. Or how about this, Parker? Special teams. Tackle Kenny Nwangu on the kickoff return, or don't get a punt blocked. It's basically taken 2 epic team-wide collapses, Parker, for this team to fall to 1-2. And I think it hurts people to realize it's a little bit of a paper tiger, but at the same time, they're that close to being 3-0.
Yeah, they are, and it's a fair point, John. But at the end of the day, that's the difference between a good team and a great team. A good team will come up a play or two short at times. A great team will always make that play or two that pushes them over the top and gets them a win in a close football game like that. And right now, Oklahoma's not a great team. Could they be by season's end? Absolutely. But those things got to get manifested right now in the here and now this week against Texas before we start having that conversation. They got things to clean up. And even if it is just 1 play, 2 play, 3 plays, those plays have to get made.
Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, man, guys, I'm sorry. I got some bad news. Hey, are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman or a car dealership in Oklahoma City or a restaurant in Edmond, or maybe you're a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you just want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Well, then consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at all_Sooners. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter at all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune, Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover, Hoover. You knew that. Parker's also on Instagram, Parker Thune. Look for me on Facebook at John E. Hoover Media. Our website, of course, is allsooners.com. And listen, guys, we upload like 5, 6, 7 news stories every day with videos. Every one of them's got a video on it. We got photos, we got lists, we got countdowns, we got interviews, we got high school recruiting highlights and interviews. We got it all. One-stop shop, SI Sooners, allsooners.com. And remember, both Parker and I are going to be in Dallas. We've both got credentials to this game. So, man, we are going to be bringing it all to you at SI Sooners, allsooners.com. And remember, it's all free, including our community section where you just jump in, post your opinion, post some links, post some pics. Not those pics, but just some pics. Whatever you want. We'll take a look at them. And the video version of this podcast is over on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. Got a comment section there too. If you're into that kind of thing, I'd highly recommend it. It's pretty strong. You people know what you're doing on those comments section. Just stay away from the spam. Stuff's gross, people. Come on. Okay, Parker, I teased it at the break. I'm sorry, but I got some bad news. Readers at allsooners.com are already going to know this. I wrote a story yesterday. I wrote another one today. And listen, I don't mean to be all doom and gloom and Mr. Negative and, oh, you can't possibly win this game. But did you see my 2 stories basically on why OU can't win this game? They have a freshman quarterback, number 1, making his first start in the Red River rivalry. And Spencer Rattler is going up against a senior quarterback in Sam Ehlinger. That is not the combination you want, Parker.
No, not at all. And especially in a game like this where it's so important to have that mental fortitude coming into this atmosphere, John. And look, as we talked about, it's not going to be the same atmosphere that it usually is. And it's a lot easier to have mental fortitude in a stadium of 23,000 people than it is in a stadium of 90,000 people. But there's something to be said for having done this thing before. And Sam Ehlinger has. In fact, he's about to become the first quarterback in school history to make 5 starts against Oklahoma. So, he's been around, John. This guy knows what he's doing, and he's been in this situation before. He's gone up against Lincoln Riley's defenses. He's gone up against both the Mike Stoops defenses and the Alex Grinch defenses. He knows what they look like. He knows what he's up against. And the fact of the matter is, Spencer Rattler doesn't have that same context, right? Spencer Rattler is making his 4th collegiate start. Sam Ehlinger has made 4 starts against Oklahoma. Spencer Rattler will be making his 4th start as a college football player. And so, granted, Rattler's much more physically gifted than Ehlinger. I don't think anyone would dispute that. He's got all the tools. But if we've seen one thing, one recurring theme from Spencer Rattler over the first 3 weeks of the season, it's that his immaturity does shine through at times, and his lack of poise hurts the Sooners in crucial moments. And you saw that last week when he decided to take the shot down the field late in the game to Charleston Rambo and ended up getting intercepted to seal the game for the Cyclones. And so, in this atmosphere, going up against your most bitter of rivals, Texas got to feel a lot more confident about rolling their quarterback out than Oklahoma does about theirs. And I know Lincoln Riley can come out and give Spencer Rattler the lip service and say, he understands what he's up against. No, he doesn't, John. He doesn't. Until you've been out there on the field and you've experienced what OU Texas truly is like as a quarterback, you're simply not going to be able to have that same mental acumen that Sam Ehlinger will no doubt have when he steps onto the field on Saturday against the Sooners. And, I get that Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield, those three guys, they all had to make their first Red River rivalry starts at times too, but they were all transfers. They all had played in big-time college football games before. Spencer Rattler hasn't. Spencer Rattler has played in games against Missouri State, Kansas State, and Iowa State, and he's lost 2 of those games. So, he's got a lot on his shoulders. The pressure is much more so on Spencer Rattler this Saturday than it is on Sam Ehlinger, and it's up to him to respond to the challenge.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say the opposite, that the pressure's on the senior quarterback rather than the freshman. Freshman, he's got nothing to lose. Go out there, wheel and deal, right? Roll it out there and let it fly. But we'll see. Here's the deal on this. Back when I wrote for the Tulsa World, I looked up this stat, okay? I think it was back in 2010, 2011 or something. And every year that it's relevant, I break it out again, I dust it off, and Parker, every year it's still true. When a quarterback makes his first OU Texas start and his counterpart has actually played in the game before, since 1990, the guy with the experience in the game is 14-3-1. 14 wins, 3 losses, 1 tie. Now, Jalen Hurts beat Sam Ehlinger last year. So you think that Jalen Hurts broke the streak, but no, come on. Jalen Hurts was a senior, as you mentioned. He was a transfer, as you mentioned, a grad transfer. I think grad transfers have kind of changed the dynamic of how we look at quarterbacks playing in big games and big game experience and things like that. And when you talk about dynamic, Jalen was as dynamic as it comes when you are talking about having played in big games before. I mean, go back to that Kansas game last year. I'm the one that asked him in the post-game press conference, Jalen, you ready for OU Texas? I know you're from Houston, but what do you know about OU Texas? He said, man, I played in the Iron Bowl. That was his answer to me. So, yeah, my little stat, to me, it doesn't really apply to him. The only 2 guys who really bucked this trend were Sam Bradford in 2007 when he beat Colt McCoy and Justin Fuente way back in 1996 when he beat James Brown. That's it. Those guys were... Both those guys were like Rattler. They were both redshirt freshmen. They came up, they did it, they got it done. Again, this is since 1990, and it doesn't count, remember, when both quarterbacks are making their first start, and it doesn't count when both quarterbacks have played in the game before, Parker. Only when one guy has been through the fires and the other guy has not. And especially, having seen Spencer Rattler try to operate in crunch time these last 2 weeks, I say Sam Ehlinger, like you said, this is his 5th game against OU. Sam Ehlinger's got a massive edge in this area, Parker.
Yeah, and it seems like I'm beating a dead horse at this point, John, but I can't emphasize enough how important your mentality is coming into a game like this. Because, as we've seen over the years, time and time and time again, it does not matter what these 2 teams' records are when they walk into the Cotton Bowl. It's very clear who is the better team on that particular day very early on. Or, if we're lucky, we get a really well-contested game all the way up until the very end. But hey, it's not out of the question, and we have seen it many times before, where a team that clearly looks inferior, whether that's Oklahoma or Texas, comes out and puts it on a team that looks far superior. And so, that would indicate to me, John, and I've felt this way for years, that when you get into this situation, at a game like OU Texas, one of the best rivalries in sports, as Alex Grinch said today on his Zoom. In this kind of context, in a game that means this much to both schools with so much history, it is absolutely crucial that you come in mentally prepared. And that right now is much more possible for Sam Ehlinger to achieve than it is for Spencer Rattler to achieve, because Sam Ehlinger's been here before. He knows what he's up against. And Lincoln Riley said yesterday, said it repeatedly, Spencer Rattler understands the challenge. But again, John, I'm not sure that he does. However, he's going to figure out what that challenge is pretty quick. About a quarter in, I think he'll figure out what kind of challenge he's actually up against, going up against the Texas Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl.
Maybe they'll do what they did a couple years ago and meet again in the Big 12 championship game, and then Spencer Rattler beats Sam Ehlinger, and all is well in Soonerland, right? Sam could come back next year, too. There's no eligibility expiring this year, so what would that be, 7? He could play in 7 of these, possibly, numerically, statistically. Crazy. The other stat that I came up with, it's a little more out there. It's a little more obvious. In the last 20 meetings, Parker, so since 2000, the team with the most rushing yards in this series, OU Texas, is 18-2. So in other words, the team that is more physical, the team that imposes its will at the line of scrimmage, has won 18 of the last 20 meetings. The only time that didn't play out was in 2014 when OU had more rushing yards, but Texas won the game. And in 2018, when Kyler, remember, snapped off that 67-yarder in the fourth quarter to give OU kind of the edge in rushing yards, even though it was Cameron Dicker who kicked the game-winning field goal. That's it. I think the teams tied one time in rushing yards, had the same amount of rushing yards at the end of the game. But other than that, the team that runs wins. And here's the bad news for Oklahoma. They're 57th in the nation out of just 74 teams at 122 yards a game rushing. Texas ranks 23rd in the nation, 191 yards a game. You throw those rushing defenses in there. OU's number 9 in the country, which is pretty good, obviously, number 9 in the country, 85 yards allowed per game. But Texas ain't bad. They're only giving up 126. That's 23rd nationally. So, Parker, if OU does not run the football, I mean, what would lead us to think that they can't run the football, right? They're averaging a whopping 3.5 yards per carry this season through 3 games, including, I think, 3.5 against Missouri State. If OU doesn't run the football dramatically better and they roll out a freshman quarterback, I don't see how they win this game, Parker.
Well, I think this is a situation, John, in which you got to run with your best horses. And right now in that Sooner backfield, it's Seth McGowan. And I think back to 2004, John, when the Sooners topped Texas 12-0 in what was largely a defensive struggle. But you know who was crucial for Oklahoma on that day? Who really made the difference? It was a young, true freshman running back named Adrian Peterson, who racked up 225 yards on the ground in that contest. And look, I'm done, and I think a lot of Sooner Nation is done with TJ Pledger at this point in time. Like, as I look at the way TJ Pledger stacks up against Seth McGowan in that Sooner backfield, McGowan has better explosiveness, he's got better burst, he's got better vision. If I'm Lincoln Riley, I'm not going to screw around with TJ Pledger in my backfield on Saturday against Texas. I'm giving the ball to Seth McGowan 20, 25 times and seeing what that can do for me. Because early indications are he's really, really good. A lot better than any of the other options in the Oklahoma backfield right now. Obviously, Ramondre Stevenson's suspension pending. But this is the kind of situation, John, when your back is against the wall, which it very much is for the Sooners. Their backs are against the wall. This is a situation in which you got to put the ball in the hands of your best players. And right now, at that running back position, Seth McGowan is Oklahoma's best player.
Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, we're going to pick the game. And, of course, it's Wednesday, so that means it's the SI Sooners podcast mailbag.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonerssi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. First up, Parker, you think we'll see Ronnie Perkins this week? We had multiple reports out of Ames last week. We talked about it on Sunday's pod, that he would be cleared to play Saturday against Texas. But Tuesday, Lincoln Riley said Ronnie Perkins' status has not changed. Sounded like Bill Clinton when I did that. Has not changed.
Well, I would say I'm inclined to believe the reports that he will play on Saturday because, to be quite honest, it wouldn't shock me if Lincoln Riley was just saying that to give himself kind of a bit of a competitive advantage, which he's said time and time again he needs and Oklahoma needs. And so, Lincoln Riley didn't say Perkins is going to play, and he didn't say he's not going to play. He said his status hasn't changed. Kind of cryptic with that answer. So right now, I am inclined to believe that Ronnie Perkins will play. That being said, we obviously won't know for sure until he either suits up or he doesn't on Saturday about an hour and a half before kickoff.
Yeah, frankly, I like questions that paint a coach into a corner. He's either got to tell the truth or he's got to claim the competitive advantage angle, which is another way of saying he lied. Because he did say he could be cleared in 5 minutes, or this could go on for another 3 weeks. So he kind of left it open-ended, let's say. Okay, let's get into this week's mailbag, Parker. You're first up from Straight Outta Pally. Why did I expect the same secondary players who got torched by K-State and Iowa State and Baylor in the championship game last year and just embarrassed by Joe Burrow in the playoff to be better this year? Am I just a moron?
Well, you're not a moron, I wouldn't say. However, I think your expectations might have been a little high because obviously getting a year of development and learning the new defensive system under Grinch helps. But at the same time, this was a much wilder offseason than anyone could have anticipated. And so if you were looking for market improvement, I think you should have probably tempered those expectations a little bit more coming into the season. But that said, there really is no excuse for how bad some of the Sooners defenders have played individually. I'm looking at Buki Radley-Hiles more specifically than anybody. Patrick Fields has struggled as well, and he's the defensive captain. I mean, there are holes right now. There are certainly holes, and there are guys that are not taking advantage of the opportunity that they have been given. And we heard Alex Grinch say earlier today there might be changes coming. And so that's something to keep an eye on. Hey, if these guys that have been in this position before and have drawn starts and have been in the system and been out there on the field, if they're not getting the job done, Grinch will find guys who will do the job. And it wouldn't shock me if going up against Texas, hey, if the Sooners fall behind early due to some sloppy secondary play, you might see a true freshman or two in that secondary. All right, John, this one's for you, courtesy of the Snack Czar. I like that handle. What has happened to this offensive line? Sloppy, mistake-prone, out of shape, just a disaster.
Yeah, Snacks are, listen, I guess I couldn't agree more. It is a mystery. We've talked about it a lot on this pod. We've written about it. We've asked the coaches about it. But you summed it up. I agree with you. They look heavy. They look slow. They look kind of disconnected. You know how an offensive line is supposed to be connected and play with chemistry and play with, knowing that what that guy's going to do without even looking at him. I don't think they have that. They talk to each other, but I don't think they have that unwritten kind of unspoken chemistry. Too many times you're seeing OU offensive linemen as well going backward at the line of scrimmage, including a handful of times Creed Humphrey, who's been rumored, reported, suggested as a first-round NFL draft pick. Creed said it yesterday, said he needs to play better. He needs to be more consistent, and he needs to play better. He needs to dominate his man at the line of scrimmage, and frankly, he needs to lead that group of offensive linemen. That's his job. He's the captain. He needs to lead better and get those guys to play better and get them to follow him. And maybe the most mysterious part is, again, we've talked about it before, all 5 returning starters are back, and they've got what has been purported in Bill Bedenbaugh to be the best offensive line coach in the country. We don't have any evidence to suggest he's not. So what is going on? I do not know. Again, 122 yards a game on the ground, handful of sacks, 3.5 yards per carry. That's not good offensive line play. Parker, from Jed Castle's News 9, I don't see how the Sooners can overcome the 1-3 start. I'm assuming we're going on the operation here that Oklahoma's going to lose to Texas. He says the consistency looks pretty settled, solid quarterback and H-back and defensive run game. Agree with all that. But other than that, he says, got a long way to go. Can the infusion of one D-end, Ronnie Perkins here, fix the trash emoji, I'm not going to say trash emoji, that the defensive backs are playing, Parker?
Well, no, John, it can't, and I think that's an unrealistic expectation. Look, the secondary, we knew, and we identified it before the season, John, as the single greatest area of weakness for Oklahoma. And no, having a top-end defensive end like Ronnie Perkins back in the mix is not going to solve those issues. Those issues are going to have to be solved by Alex Grinch, who is the safeties coach, in addition to the defensive coordinator. And look, I don't think Trey Brown is a bad cornerback. I don't think Jaden Davis is a bad cornerback. I do think that the safeties have struggled, and my gosh, you got to get Brendan Radley-Hiles out of the nickel. He's so overmatched right now. At least that's what it looks like. And I don't know, maybe Alex Grinch knows a few things that we don't. But hey, if he does know a few things that we don't, we're certainly not seeing whatever he knows. All right, John, your next question comes from T. Fish. How much do we pay Alex Grinch, we being the Oklahoma Athletic Department, to coach like Mike Stoops?
Oh, that's easy. The answer is $1.8 million a year, which, by the way, is twice as much as OU paid Mike Stoops. So there's that. Parker, Dougie Hauser, MD II, asks, in year 4, we now have a clear regression from year 1. Is Lincoln Riley just the son of a millionaire? Woo! Meaning, is he basically the heir to Bob Stoops' fortune? Man, that's harsh. But Parker, your answer is?
No, not at all. And you need to have a little bit more patience with Lincoln Riley, because the reality is he has been as good over his first 3 seasons as any coach in college football. He went 36-6 over those 3 seasons, 12-2, 12-2, 12-2. If the Sooners have been anything over his first 3 seasons at the helm, it's consistent and one step away from elite. And so if right now you're saying, okay, Lincoln Riley's the son of a millionaire because the Sooners started 1-2, let's relax with that, okay? Especially with the recruiting class that the Sooners have coming in. It gets better, okay? It's going to get better for Lincoln Riley and the Sooners. This is a blip. This is not a trend. Lincoln Riley is a different coach than Bob Stoops was, both in terms of his philosophy, his mentality, the way that he leads. The two couldn't be much more different, honestly. And so, no, Lincoln Riley is not the trust fund baby of the Oklahoma Sooners football program. He's the guy that the Sooners are going to want at the helm long term. And there's a reason why NFL front offices were making calls for this guy 2 years into his tenure as head coach at Oklahoma when he was 35 years old. No, Lincoln Riley is going to be just fine. The Sooners are going to be just fine. Does there need to be some change made? Yes. But the pieces are there, and that starts with the biggest piece right at the top in Lincoln Riley. All right, John, let's see what you've got. This question comes from Harry Taylor, who's a regular on this show. He asks, where is Jaden Davis? I thought he was good last year, and he was only a freshman. Is he even playing in 2020? Now, he is. He's starting. But Harry wants to know, what's up with Jaden Davis, John?
Harry, thanks as always for listening. I hate to be the one to break it to you, Harry. Not only has Jaden Davis been playing, he's been starting, and he has been OU's best cornerback. Yeah, he got burned in zero coverage last week when he went for the ball and not the man. Go for the man, Georgievich! You remember that. He gave up a 65-yard touchdown. You can't do that. But really, except for that one play, I think he's been pretty solid. The other 2 3/4 games. Clayton Dodds, Parker asks, does Lincoln Riley sacrifice too many opportunities to exploit weaknesses? Or maybe sacrifice taking his foot off the gas pedal for the sake of balancing run versus pass?
Okay, I don't know if this is what you're getting at here, Clayton, but I do want to bring one thing to the table because it was alarming to me to watch it happen again this week or this past week against Iowa State. Lincoln Riley doesn't seem to have any sense of urgency in late game situations when the clock is ticking. The fact that the Sooners let as much time run off that clock that last drive against Iowa State as they did was shocking to me. It seemed like, they're taking their time getting to the line of scrimmage, clock's ticking under 2 minutes, and you've got 2 timeouts in your pocket, and essentially you're banking on that drive being a scoring drive, a touchdown drive, and if it's not, you lose the football game. And that's exactly what happened. And so, yeah, Lincoln Riley, to me, especially in late game situations, and we know, and we've said it before, he has a tendency to take his foot off the gas, but he's a different coach in the second half, and I can't figure out why it is or why it keeps happening. And listen, the players can only do so much on the field, right? There are certain issues that go back to leadership, that can be traced back to leadership. And in my eyes, Lincoln Riley's not as good of a leader in the fourth quarter as he is in the first 3. And it's baffling, and I can't figure it out, but that's the way it is. All right, John. Pally's back and asks, OU lost to 2 teams with 0 4- to 5-star recruits versus OU's 50. How is that possible? Coaching issue? Or has it become, like Texas, a culture issue? Uh-oh.
My gosh, Pally, you are bringing the thunder today. Yeah, sure. I think we're seeing a little bit of what Bob Stoops in 2005, if my memory serves, called entitlement. Caught him by surprise, and I think it might be creeping up on Lincoln Riley from behind as well. I don't think he saw it coming. With Stoops, it was his first time to deal with it. Guys coming back in the 2 deep and just assuming that they were the starters. I'm next in line. I got this job, He had, think about it. When Stoops got there, he had to build everything back in 99, and then boom, they won the championship in 2000. But for the most part, from that point on, this is basically the same time frame. About 4 or 5 years in, you've won a bunch of games and a bunch of trophies. You've made yourself feel real good. And yeah, guys are all of a sudden patting themselves on the back and talking about how great they are. Haven't got a national championship yet, of course, but I think maybe standards are different. Not just at Oklahoma, worldwide standards are different in sports in 2020 than they were in 2000, 2004. Maybe you've got guys that are getting soft, maybe you've got guys that are feeling entitled. If they lose to Texas, I think that question might come up next week in the Lincoln Riley press conference, the Zooms, about being entitled. This team might need to find its edge. They might need to find that hunger again, like Stoops' teams did eventually, or boom, yeah, you might be right. A Mac Brown, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman type of fall might be staring Lincoln Riley right in the face. Ooh, gives you shudders, doesn't it? He's got to get that entitlement. If it's there, he's got to get it out of the program, or it can be a cancer. Just ask Texas. Last one, Parker. BK asks, what is our guess on an over-under for missed tackles Sunday by the OU secondary? I say throw the linebackers in there, and your over-under would be like 9.5.
Yeah, I would take the over, John. I really would, especially with Sam Ehlinger playing quarterback for Texas. That dude's hard to bring down. We've seen it every single year. And right now, nobody, save for maybe Brian Asamoah, and I would say definitely Delarian Turner-Yell, really nobody is a sure tackler for the Sooners right now on the defensive side of the football. Everybody looks like a liability in that capacity. And so I am not confident that we see anything less than double-digit missed tackles from Oklahoma. All right, John. Coach Martin asks, has anyone ever seen a defense improve while playing the same people?
I would say yes. I would say last year's team was basically the same exact guys as the 2018 team, and that team showed major improvement. So it can happen. Guys just got to listen. Guys got to play better. Guys got to stop missing tackles. Guys got to stop making bad decisions like holding and pass interference. Stop committing those back-breaking penalties. And you know what? Here's some advice. Catch a freaking interception once in a while. Parker, I said that was the last one. Let's finish with this one. I got like 3 questions about this from 3 different guys, like Devin Robinson, Brett Crawford, and I think Mike Blue. Asked about the defensive backs, and I'll kind of combine these questions here if I can. Isn't it time, Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley, to give the young guys a shot at playing? Now, I say, before you answer, I say absolutely. Looks very much like this is already happening. I say you can expect to see some young guys pretty much throughout the secondary get their first action on Saturday, the first real sustained action, which, listen, frankly, can't be a good thing. It might be a necessary thing. It might be something to build for the future, for sure. They'll be better for it in the long run, of course. But one thing I don't want to hear, Parker, is how much all those young freshman defensive backs suck the first time they actually get in the game. These guys are terrible. The first time they get in a game for OU and it's against Texas and you're going to throw them under the bus, don't do that. Don't be that fan, okay? Man, I hate that. You scream all year for a bunch of freshmen to play, and then when they finally do you play and they play like a bunch of freshmen, you're going to want to throw them under the bus. Just don't do it. Here's the deal. Lincoln said he's had freshmen in COVID protocol for like 10 days now, 14 days, some 28 days. 28 days in COVID protocol? He said some of those guys are now available. Most years when there's not COVID, they would have been available already. And Parker, I think if we're to believe Joshua Eaton on Twitter, he said something great is going to happen in a few days. There you go, Parker. What say you?
I know Josh Eaton tweeted after the game on Saturday, "Free me and Bryson Washington." I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, those are obviously two of the Sooners' most physically gifted young defensive backs. And so it would not shock me at all if we saw some of them get into the game on Saturday. And hey, I will say, Woody Washington hasn't been half bad. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets some more run. But yeah, John, the expectations have to be tempered. They've got to be low because these kids are true freshmen, and a lot of them have been through COVID-19 protocol, as you mentioned. So let's not expect that they're going to trot out there on Saturday and set the world on fire and be leaps and bounds better than Brendan Radley-Hiles and Patrick Fields and Jaden Davis have been. Is that certainly a possibility? Yes, but it should not be the expectation. And so I'm excited. I think, as I said before, John, I think this is the week that we start to see some turnover in the Sooners secondary, given what we saw last week and the existing talent in that secondary, or lack thereof, I should say. We're going to see some pieces moved around. We're going to see Alex Grinch playing some chess with his defensive backs. And you said, John, you don't think that can be a good thing. I think it can. I think there's a lot of good that can come out of this game if you are able to strike the right balance and you're able to find the right mix with those pieces in the secondary. And, you know, maybe you stumble upon a revelation. Maybe you throw Jeremiah Cradell out there in nickelback and he's just a stud. And that could be the case. And that could be very beneficial to the Sooners going forward if they're able to identify a guy or two that has legitimate potential to take their play in the back end of that defensive unit to another level.
Okay, quickly, Parker, we got to make our picks. OU by 2.5, depending on what service you follow. Oh, the total is 70.5. Who you got?
I will take Oklahoma. I think this is a really high-scoring game, John, because none of these teams are going to be playing any defense. I said it earlier in the week. I'll say it again. I think Oklahoma wins this game 55-52. Yeah, I think you're looking at 100-plus points between these two teams. That's how confident I am that there will be absolutely no defense played on Saturday.
That would be like a ride on the Midway. I'll go out there and stand in the Midway and barf if it's 55-52. I've got Texas, and I've already told you why. They run the ball better than OU. They've got a more experienced quarterback than OU. And there's a bunch of other reasons. Like, one, OU doesn't make plays in the fourth quarter. We've seen that the last 2 weeks. Two, OU special teams are suddenly allowing catastrophic plays. You can't do that and win a game in the Cotton Bowl. And then three, man, this game always seems to pivot on turnovers. And guess who doesn't get turnovers? Yeah, OU. So give me Texas. Parker and I, as I said, are going to be in the press box at the Cotton Bowl on Saturday. And folks, if you're good, we'll also have some recruiting gold for you next week. So you can look for all our coverage at allsooners.com. Next podcast is Sunday night. I want you guys to enjoy the game. Enjoy the game responsibly, but you better get your comments ready for next week's mailbag because it's going to be lit. Listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts, or tell your Amazon-enabled device, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast and enjoy. On the website, allsooners.com, you click on the player, listen on either your phone, your tablet, or your computer, and the video version is always over on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.